I know the popular talking point is about how the Brooklyn Nets were big-time winners in this NBA offseason and how they have positioned themselves to be future championship contenders. Years after that disastrous-ass Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce deal was set the organization back years, cost them all types of draft picks, and all that time of kind of toiling away this past season. The Nets found something a little bit, made the playoffs, have a bunch of cap space. Bob's your uncle. D'Angelo Russell's gone. In comes Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and DeAndre Jordan. And all of a sudden now the Nets are going to be fucking contenders. Now maybe they are. Maybe they are. And on the surface, for an organization like the Nets, who play in the city of New York, play in Brooklyn, I should say, but at the same point in time, you could say, even if they're better than the Knicks, they always play second fiddle there. At least they have their own arena in the Barclays Center, even if it's a dome. The bottom line is they needed to do something to really stand out, and I give them credit. They positioned themselves to make these types of moves, and they ultimately got the job done. They were in a position where they either had to sit there and decide, are we going to be a little better than mediocre with young players and pray to God that they develop, or are we going to go out there and be aggressive and try to win now? The Brooklyn Nets decided they wanted to win now and ultimately executed. And for that, I salute them. They had a plan, and they were able to execute, unlike the New York Knicks. But we need a little bit of a reality check here when it comes to the moves that the Nets made. You start with Kevin Durant. Yes, you give him 4 years, $164 million, and if healthy, he clearly deserves that. He is arguably the best player in the game, but he's also on the wrong side of 30, coming off of a ruptured Achilles tendon that he suffered in the NBA Finals, which most likely means he is going to miss all of the 2019-2020 season. I would be surprised if he came back, but maybe he would come back in March or April. But even when you say that, he would most likely not come back at 100% or even close to 100% until his age 32 season in the 2021-21 campaign. Think about that. He'd be coming back at 32. So you paid him a year, over $40 million or so, to sit there and not play at all. And when you look at the injury that he had, not like Klay Thompson with the torn ACL, where guys come back from the torn ACL and it's not really that big of an issue long term. There is a much less established great track record of history of guys coming back from torn Achilles injuries. It's just not great. Now, sure, you could throw out there the guys like Kobe Bryant and Chauncey Billups who did it much later in their 30s and they were never ever the same ever again. But I could point out other guys like Wesley Matthews has never been the same since his happened in his 20s. You could sit there and look at Elton Brand. If I remember correctly, he was like in his late 20s when it happened. And after that, he couldn't jump off of 1 foot anymore. His career was basically over. While you could sit there and hope that he has a Dominique Wilkins type of return from that torn Achilles, there is no guarantee of that. And on top of that, Durant in recent years has started to have some injury problems. His durability hasn't been quite as solid as it's been in previous years. You're talking about a guy that's only played 70 games twice out of the last 5 seasons. You can talk about workload management, my ass. It's because some of those seasons he was battling different assorted injuries, some serious and not so much. But you're talking about giving a guy over $40 million a year that would take him in theory through his age 34 season, coming off of an injury where the track record is not great. It is a mixed bag to say the very least. And while you could say, yes, Kevin Durant comes back at 90%, of what he was, he's probably still worth the deal, fine. But if he comes back at 80 or 75% of that deal, it doesn't look so good anymore, does it? And then you got Kyrie Irving. Yeah, he's only going to be 28 next season, but you give him $35+ million a year. He's only played 75 games once in his entire fucking career. The guy is a walking fucking durability issue. It's a little thing here, it's a big thing there, it's a little thing here, it's a big thing there. Not to mention he's a pain in the ass. He's a difficult-ass personality. You can consider him a locker room cancer with what happened at the end of his run in both Cleveland and fucking Boston. And when you really break it down fundamentally, is he really that much better and worth that much more than D'Angelo Russell? At this moment, maybe you would say yes. that 65 games of Kyrie Irving is better than 80 of D'Angelo Russell. And maybe you're right. But is that going to be the same case 2 or 3 damn years from now? You invested a lot of money into 2 guys that have some injury concerns. That should be a bit of a reason for concern. And then talking about DeAndre Jordan. It's not a big deal in terms of the amount of the contract. 4 years at $40 million. It's going to take him through his age 34 season. His defense, his rebounding, his shot blocking are all in decline. You think about the Mavs a few years back, were so obsessed about getting DeAndre Jordan, they didn't get him. And then when they finally did get him on a 1-year deal, they ended up sending him packing a few months later. He's an extremely limited offensive player. At least he finally learned how to hit some damn free throws. And while his contract by comparison is not that bad, how much is he really going to bring you? And if DeAndre Jordan was that great and valuable of a big man, how come teams that featured him as one of their top players didn't win more? Especially in the playoffs when it fucking mattered. Now you could say with the Nets, you bring in Durant, and maybe he comes back in that 21 season. You got Kyrie in the peak of his career, DeAndre Jordan, still a viable big man, even if you don't play him the same number of minutes as he's played in years past. So you got a young core of guys like Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert and Kurux and Jarrett Allen. The cupboard is not totally bare. It's not just going to be these 3 guys and that's it. You've got some young pieces around them that could make them exciting, that could make them competitive, that could potentially make them contenders. But again, I emphasize you won't have Kevin Durant for most, if any, of next season. So the likelihood of Kyrie Irving and DeAndre Jordan making that much of a big difference to where you take that huge next step forward and now all of a sudden you're in the Eastern Conference Finals and potentially banging out to go to the NBA Finals, that feels like a massive fucking stretch. And then even once Durant did come back, what guarantees do you have that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are going to be able to function together, that they're going to be able to play together, that this is going to go well, that this isn't going to ultimately end up with hurt feelings and resentment from both parties towards each other? Like Durant can be a little prickly too, and we all know Kyrie is, and we think putting these 2 together, these oversensitive dudes, is going to work out well? Excuse the fuck out of me. I know the Nets look really good here from the standpoint of they had a strategy, they had a plan, they executed and made it happen. And you know what? You could judge them on that and say, job well done. And they deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. Because at least they're swinging for the fences. Whether it works or whether it doesn't work remains to be seen. In theory, though, you could bring in Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving with no injury histories, completely healthy, and it still might not fucking work. You could have DeAndre Jordan of 3 years ago, who was a much better player, and bring him in, and it still might not fucking work. But ultimately, if you're the Nets organization, if this doesn't work out, you deserve to be crapped on every which way from Sunday. Because you don't make these moves to make the Eastern Conference Finals. You don't make these moves to make the NBA Finals. You make these moves to win in the NBA Finals and win championships. And with the way the landscape of the league has kind of changed, I just don't know that the Nets have positioned themselves as well as they can. Maybe in 21 and 22 they make the Eastern Conference Finals. But if you're asking me to believe in them being championship contenders with this roster construction, that's an awful big ask. I'm sorry, but I feel this is just as likely to blow up in the Nets' face as it is to end in them hoisting a Larry O'Brien trophy. I'm sorry, I gotta say it.